as you're watching this video, somewhere a battle is taking place between the Romans and the Mongols. They fight who gets to keep ownership over Machu Picchu. Somewhere else, a dwarven archaeologist in a desert far from his home is excavating the artifacts of his people. Somewhere else again, a kid has just built the entire Roman Colosseum in one day. These are the types of experiences that video games allow us to have of the past in the present. But beyond the current moment, in the past, somewhere a kid has just invented the very first hula hoop. And a mother has just given the very first play bow and arrow set to her daughter. Or somewhere a king is just becoming ever more angry because he just keeps on losing at this particular board game from his consort. So all of these particular things are experiences of the past or experiences in the past. They're tangled up with this concept, this large concept of play. And what we will be doing in this honors course, I, Angus, together with my colleagues Sibyl Lammes and Aris Politopoulos, both from Leiden University as well, but also with you, our viewer, or our student in our particular course, but maybe also our viewer right now on YouTube. We will give you analytical frameworks, tools, but also our own experiences of the past and of play. So this is part of a larger idea, the Past at Play project. And the Past at Play project really tries to get at play in the past. So how did people play in the past, but also how do we play with the past in the present? And one of the things that has been really useful for us, and something that we will also ask you to read, is the MDA framework. It's a way of analyzing and thinking about games in different modules. So these different modules can be mechanics. These are the game rules, the codes, the game assets. These can be the dynamics, what happens to play in action, what happens in the moment of the game. And these can also be the aesthetics. These aesthetics are the emotional and cultural responses that you have as a player to a game in the moment, or maybe reflecting on it back afterwards. So when it comes to the past and play, all of these already pretty complex things become caught up in this larger consideration of how we think about and how we relate to the past in the present. So how do games allow us to recreate and experience the past through play in the present is really what is at the core of this project, and is also at the core of this particular course. And as I said, there are all sorts of different tools that we can go about this, and we need those because understanding games as experiences is pretty hard. For example, think about the last time that you had a really cool experience, a really cool thing happened during one of your games, and you want to tell about that thing, for example, your parents or to your friends or family, it doesn't really matter who, but you want to communicate what happened in that moment. It's really hard. You will tell a story, and while you're telling the story, you're sort of realizing that you cannot really fully capture the excitement, the fun, maybe the terror or the joy. It doesn't really matter what you were feeling in the moment of that particular moment. It's really hard, and you have to come well equipped to be able to talk about your experiences in such a way, because they are dynamic. They're created in the moment, and they're also created between different actors, if you will. For example, if you're playing a video game, between you as a human being and the computer that is creating the game as you're playing it, right? And you're interacting with it, and that's why the computer is reacting to you. Or if you're playing with other humans, at least you will still have that shared understanding of that particular moment in play, even though that can also still, change, right? We're famous for having different understandings of experiences happening to us. Or if you're playing a solo game like Solitaire, you will still be interacting with something else, the rules in this particular case of a game. And rules are most games are very complex, so things almost never repeat itself in the same way. And aside from that, our experiences are, in that sense, deeply personal, right? So what actually happened during that moment? Even if you play with people, as I just said already, it could be that you have different understandings of what happened in that particular moment, or you will have different feelings, right? So one person will play a moment in the game, and the other person will play it as well, and one may be super excited about, may be terrified, or whatever, and the other person may think it is completely boring. And aside from that, it is also about the perspectives, the understandings that you bring of culture in general, or that particular aspect of culture that is represented in the game. In this particular course, these aspects of cultures will always have something to do with the past. So, to us, this sort of sidesteps focusing on games as experiences and stories that you have to tell about these experiences. Sort of sidesteps the larger sort of ludology versus narratology debate that I'm not going to get into in this particular talk, because that is something that Sibylle Lammers will have discussed in her lecture, right? So that sort of is sidestepping that, because we are both seeing it as play in the moment, as an experience, but also as something that you can tell stories about and that you can write quote-unquote texts about. So, stories of games, is the bottom line, are always based in our own experiences. But the past itself is also an experience. Sometimes it is an experience that already has happened to us. Sometimes it's an experience that has happened to somebody else further along in the past, or right now in the present to somebody else. Even if the past is an experience that has already taken place, it doesn't mean that it is altogether gone. And the study of experiences of the past, or things that took place in the past, is of course something that is studied academically, right? Through heritage studies, through history, through archaeology, through memory studies, through all sorts of different academic disciplines. It's also something that we actively engage with as a larger body of citizens, for example, in museums, libraries, archives, memorials, or in our formal school training, right? Or maybe in our informal training or knowing about the past through stories of our grandparents, etc. We feel games can also be part of that sort of larger group of what we call stewards of the past. These things that curate for us, so that could be academic disciplines, could be public institutions, but this can all be forms of media that curate and provide access to the past to us in the present. And to put too fine a point to it, we think this is important because the past has an enormous impact on the present and our future, right? And not only in some sort of cause and effect kind of way, but also in the sense that how we relate to the past and the present on a personal level, but also on a communal and societal level, really affects how we view the world today. So it's not only this happened, so that happened, but also this happened, therefore we nowadays think and believe such and such. And that's why we feel it's important too. As I said, this is all very complex, but as you will find, in the telling of this story and in the experiencing of play, in the experiencing of the past, this will start to make sense. And one of my favorite ways of dealing with this is in some sort of a diary approach to this. So you may have, if you studied anything like archaeology or history, or have taken an interest in it, you may have heard the sentence, the past is a foreign country, sometimes followed by they do things differently there. So really, the past is a place that, I really like this sentiment, because it seems that the past is a place we can go, but we cannot truly ever really understand it, right? And this sentence comes from L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between, which is this book from the 1950s. And beyond this sentence, it has this very interesting and I think rather lovely opening passage. I'm just going to read out to you. When I came upon the diary, it was lying at the bottom of a rather battered red cardboard collar box, in which as a small boy I kept my Eton collars. Someone, probably my mother, had filled it with treasures dating from those days. The relics had the patina of age, and as I handled them for the first time for over 50 years, a recollection of what each had meant to me came back, faint as the magnet's power to draw, but as perceptible. It was a roll call in reverse. The children of the past announced their names, and I said, here. Only the diary refused to disclose its identity. And the rest of the story is about how he relives this particular moment of his childhood, partly through the diary, which gives this different sort of perception of it. And the diary, in that sense, is a way of communicating about the past through the experiences of somebody else. So this is not his diary, this is the diary of somebody else that he sort of gets to read. And this is also a technique that is discussed here. So, of course, we can recall the past by interacting with artifacts and of our own past, right? But you can also try, through a diary approach, try to tell the story of those experiences. And more formally speaking, such a diary approach in game studies or just in media studies and ethnography and social studies in general is called autoethnography. And autoethnography is something that we'll do quite a bit of. So just to sort of dissect this a little bit, it comes from autobiography and ethnography. Ethnography is, of course, the study of, an account of a particular culture, the writing about a particular folk, people, or nation. Very often, especially in the past, this was, somebody else's culture and another culture or society. Now more in the present, it's also about our own societies. But sort of the bottom line is that it's a way of perceiving and processing culture through participatory observation and of specific cultural experiences. So in this case, the participatory observation, the playing of, and the sort of seeing of games being played. That's the cultural experience, the playing of games, or the playing of the past through games in a very specific circumstance. And the modus operandi of autoethnography is this very qualitative, rich, detailed, analytical still description. So when you first start out doing autoethnography, you will find that it's maybe very hard. For some of you, it may be quite hard because you're already used to writing in your own diaries, and you're already used to reflecting on your own experience in sort of a autoethnographic, informal way. But then is also the part of the analysis and the communication of that particular experiences. That is very important. Or maybe you are just very analytical and you have no problem with writing very academic texts in which analysis and data go hand in hand, and all of a sudden you have to draw on your own experiences as a form of data and analysis. This can also be very hard. But practice makes, not necessarily always perfect. We also still have a lot to learn, but at least practice helps in furthering your understanding of this particular form of engaging with cultural experiences. Formally spoken, and you can also find a link to this particular article in the course materials, it's an approach to research and writing that seeks to describe and systematically analyze personal experience in order to understand cultural experience. In practice, what it will come down to is that you will use retrospectives. So you can sort of keep a running tally of what you're doing and make extensive notes and everything. If you write everything down, it becomes like a map in the present of the past. So you will be not only retrospective, but you will also be selective. You will focus on writing about these or processing these types of experiences, these moments that you can sort of call loosely epiphanies. This aha moment, right? Where you got it, where you think something that happened in a game in this case is exemplary for what is going on as a larger cultural experiences with the game. And you have to do this, you have to describe this particular experience very evocatively. It is not in the sort of toned down language of that academia normally uses. No, it is in a way that is rich and detailed and that evokes for other people, the readers, that particular experience that you have undergone yourself. And it also has to be analytic. So you have to put it in perspective and connect it to other experiences and to other data. You also have to be very descriptive about it. So you have to really dissect, or you can really dissect the different elements of your experience. And it also is very much about understanding how you write about these experiences, how that also sort of gives you a larger understanding of this experience yourself. So there's lots of things that are going into this particular ethnographic practice, autoethnographic practice. And maybe, this is all still a little bit vague, so let me just give you a couple of examples of autoethnography. In this particular very first one, my own, in the form of what we sort of loosely refer to as vignettes. Sort of little selective bits of text that really sort of zero in on that moment of epiphany. And why this particular vignette that we're reading right now is a moment of epiphany, I will explain a little bit later. I'll just first read it. The Romans, at least the ones we know about, did not really like to come to the Netherlands at all. In fact, one of them, Tacitus, wrote something along the lines of, "This is a land rough in its surface, rigorous in its climate, cheerless to everyone who views it, except for someone who was born there. The young girl sitting next to me at the computer looks affronted. She clearly does not agree with the spirit of the text that I just quoted to her. That guy doesn't know anything, she fumes. He clearly never visited Katwijk during the summer. She is right, of course. Tacitus never visited Katwijk, a little-known place called Groenenbataforum at the literal end of the road in 150 AD, but now a town popular for its beaches and also the home of this girl. I still try to do my best to explain to her that the landscape of the Netherlands was a bit more wild and less welcoming back then. These Romans just did not know how to have fun, she replies, but I'll build them something that shows them how fun this place can be. She asks to be teleported from the fort we are building to the coast. 15 minutes later, she has built a lovely little hut, right there on the beach. So this vignette is a retelling of one of my experiences that I had during Romeinkraft, which is this public heritage project that we undertook. Much more on this later on in the course, in which we rebuilt the Roman border area in the Netherlands from 150 AD in Minecraft, together with a large group of participators from all sorts of different ages, lots of them kids, of course. And this particular moment in this project, this particular experience, retold here as a vignette, really sort of made me understand in a much deeper way what was actually going on. With what we were doing there, retelling history through Minecraft or rebuilding history through Minecraft. And that is that often when we tell stories of the past, they are very authoritative. They're, by authors, classical authors like Tacitus, or by your professor in university. But when you're playing, you sort of become part of the story. You get to interact with it. And in fact, you get to counter parts of the story, as this girl was doing right here. She was saying, well, listen, the Tacitus may have thought that, but clearly they didn't know. Clearly the Romans didn't know how to have fun in this particular landscape of ours that I know how to have fun in because I live here. And that's what she did, right? She literally showed by building a little beach hut how Romans could have had fun in the past. And, maybe it's not the case that the Romans built beach huts, or that local people built beach huts for the Romans. Could have happened. We haven't really found them archaeologically. But it does underline that, when you're thinking about the lived experience, in this case, of Roman soldiers stationed here, or Roman migrants, or just people locally living here, it may be better to rely on the play experiences and the play recreations of a girl living in right now, in 2020, or this was actually in 2017, than it is to rely on somebody who actually lived during the time, but was writing from far, far away, with relatively little understanding of what was going on right here. So that's really what this sort of experience did for me, and that's how I retold it in this larger paper that I will also share with you during this course as well. So at the same time, this is of course my own experience, so I can tell about it and really give you a lot of extra context. But even an experience that is not my own, it can also work like that. So this is example number 2, a vignette written by Sibylle Lammes as part of a paper that she did with Stephanie de Smaal in 2018, Civilization as a Waiting Game. I am going to play Civilization 6 for the very first time since its release. I have downloaded the game and now click on the play button in my Steam library, anticipating that the game will soon start. Instead, the text, "Loading, please wait," appears on my computer screen. Taking advantage of this moment, I think about the last time I played Civilization. And I feel a bit uneasy since it has been almost 10 years since I last engaged with games like this, and examined them as post-colonial practices. Will I still understand the basic principles? Will play researching this new version bring any new insights? So this vignette, this experience of playing a game for research, is also something that evokes a lot of understanding for what Sibylle was going through when she was starting up this particular research project. And there's certain things that I've never really sort of experienced myself. For example, I've been playing Civilization more or less continuously since the 1990s. But I still understand this moment of apprehension that can sneak up onto you when you're actually sort of waiting in a game for it to load. Right? So this moment from the past of Sibyl in this case, reflecting on her own past playing this particular game, also evokes to me this larger understanding. For example, when I'm loading a game, I'm always like, will it load, right? Especially if you load it for the first time. Will my computer do it? Slightly different, but it also underlines the waiting aspect in this case of games. At the same time, I can also generally just understand the whole experience that Sibyl is going through, because I've also studied Civilization 6 extensively, and I know how exciting it can be and how ready you can be to get into it, and how fun it can be also to study this. So all of these things are encapsulated within this particular vignette, this description, and they speak to me and they let me analyze the larger and let me better understand the larger analysis that Sibyl Lammes and Stephanie de Smala were making in their article when I read it. So this is what autoethnography can do for us in games. And there's many other tools, and we will look at many other tools, particularly on the mechanics and then also on the dynamic side of things. But this is really what lets you sort of understand the experiences, the aesthetics, so the experiences that people have had, the representations of games, and also of the past that they have had, by writing about your own representations, and of course also by reading those of others. So concluding, in this course we will reflect on personal experiences of past play through vignettes and other forms of autoethnography. We're also going to be evoking and analyzing stories of larger cultural significance through vignettes of others, but also, of course, through other forms of research and literature. Within this sort of setting, we feel autoethnography has a very natural place in thinking and talking about games in our past. And particularly autoethnography that is, connects our own experiences to these larger stories. For example, the stories that we will show in the moment is we will live stream and let's play specific games having to deal with the past, and that we feel has a very specific story to tell of them. You will also reflect on your own experiences from the past, but also create new play experiences of the past in this particular course. And we as a group will reflect on the very multifaceted experiences that make up the past at play. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll see you in the next lecture, or during class, or maybe in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. Regardless, I'm looking forward to it. See you then. Bye.